Okay, welcome back to all of our viewers and listeners. And today we have Ritchie Ng joining us. I must say, I'm really thrilled to have you. And I will reveal to you now, I'm like president of your fan club. Oh my gosh, I just revealed that. Okay, so Ritchie is the head of data and AI in the investment industry, leading AI and data engineering. He's also a research scholar in NUS. And he's been in the industry. You've been in the industry for more than 10 years,
Yep.
right? So thank you so much for coming. Yeah, really, really, really cool to have you here. So let's start with why you're here, right? So let me start with asking this question, which is why did you fall in love with data and AI?
Well, it's an interesting and long journey, actually. It's been almost 10 years. And actually, I fell in love when I was in university. What happened was one of my classmates went on to work for this company, which a lot of people might be familiar now, but at that point, it's like a small company. And the name of the company was called NVIDIA. So he came down to campus and then he was like, hey, I had this really cool job. And he can make some cars self-drive, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's promising. So he was like, let me show you the technology. And he actually brought me overseas and tried it because we're going for short holidays with my bunch of friends. And actually, I thought that was one of the most amazing things that I saw. And what happened after that was like, I started this like NVIDIA NUS club. And what happened was it grew. We had like tons of people who were like enthusiastic to see how AI worked at that point in time. At that time, it was still patchy in performance. So it was like a little...
It was a bit clunky, right?
Yeah, it's a bit clunky. It's not as performant as what you see now. So it was quite interesting to see over 10 years what I once saw as like a small company, which was really interesting, to grow to become one of the biggest company on the planet. And I still have a huge amount of friends who are still working there. So it was interesting to see how it all started from that 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is that you then got to see the evolution, right, of AI from clunky to where it is now.
Yeah.
Right. What are some of the key highlights of what you've seen in terms of development?
I would say the first thing it was really good at doing for AI was generally just recognizing numbers. At that time, I remember my professor was like, it's super at recognizing numbers. You write the ugliest handwriting, it was really good. And then we got like a couple of like medicine students in because they generally have not the best handwritings. and they could recognize the numbers no matter what kind of cursive handwriting you had. And ironically, it's being used in post office to recognize postal numbers and stuff like that.
Wow.
And it evolved from that over time to be able to recognize faces really well. I think you can imagine there's this meme that went in halfway many years ago where you could recognize whether it's a chihuahua or is it a muffin. I should show you the image where it's actually quite hard to differentiate whether it's a chihuahua, like a brown chihuahua, and like a blueberry muffin.
Uh-huh.
It's actually quite hard. So a true test of whether the AI algorithms work is whether it could differentiate whether it's a chihuahua or a muffin. I'll show you the picture. You'll laugh at it.
That's really interesting. I'm a bit jumping the gun, but I'm really curious about this, which is, as a coach, we're talking right now about the early days of AI, where we're talking about just recognizing numbers, right? Or chihuahua and muffins, right? But now we're talking about AI's capacity from a coach lens, nuances in moods, for example. Can it do that?
Yeah, so ironically, that was also one of the first venture we had. So I remember at the time, my colleagues in NVIDIA and I, we were running like a demo. It was demo day for one of the event we were running. And basically what happened was that we were showing this where you stand in front of the camera and then you smile. So you could recognize 3 emotions, whether you're happy, whether you're sad, or whether you're angry. But you have to be really explicit at that time, like 8-10 years ago.
Like exaggerated,
like, when you're really smiling or you're really angry. But sometimes, in fact, I would say in most of the contexts, when you're angry, you don't really show it explicitly that you're really angry. Or when you're happy, some people just don't smile that much. And that's when the algorithms fail at that point in time. I would say fast forward 10 years, it's gotten way better to detect nuances. Even I would even go one step further, that we have gone on to recognize emotions, to even, I would say at this point in time, I've seen certain companies who are even able to kind of recognize whether you're, I would say, apprehensive, or even to a point of whether you're lying. So actually, it's quite interesting how it's evolved, and how they detect it is not only through your facial recognition, but your words and your intonation. So it basically combines what is recognizing from your eyes and the way that you're leaning forward, leaning backwards, and your intonation, and whether you're a bit like changing a bit of your tune, a bit of your pitch, and all of this combined.
Interesting. What
would
about
be
heart
able
rate?
to determine.
If you hook a machine up,
Yes.
does it do that as well?
And let me tell you something interesting. So it used to be where if you hook it up, then it will give you even better results. And I think the technology has evolved to a point where visually you could actually see the person breathing, and that's more than enough. So because of how, like you and I, we're breathing right now, and you could see it from a computer vision perspective, you could basically see whether there are changes in terms of the person's breathing patterns. And that actually is a huge contributor also. So actually it's a huge leap from 10 years ago.
Huge.
Huge
Oh my
leap.
gosh.
Huge leap.
Again, I'm so curious. Where do you see the future? If this is what can happen in 10 years' time, what are some of the behind the scenes research that is gonna come out and surprise us all about AI?
I would say one of the biggest area would be a lot of the work that we do right now. There is increasing kind of examples that it could be easily augmented with AI. So whether I call it, to keep the principle simple, I call it a data in, data out. Whether you are, whatever industry you're in, whatever function you're in, you're reading an email and then you're replying an email. You're reading a bunch of Excel sheets, a bunch of even maybe database or dashboards or reports. And then you digest that information internally, and then you write another report, or you write an email to say, hey, let's do something like this, or this is the summary of what I observed. So there's this whole underlying principle of we're all taking this data in and bringing a lot of data out. And I think in that principle, there is a lot of opportunity, I would say, for AI to step in to basically augment a lot of our workflows. I think the key here is augment with human in the loop. I think there are two camps right now out there. People who would like to say that AI could kind of replace a lot of what we do, but I adopt a different view. I adopt a view where AI augments what we do. It changes the way we work. So for example, if you spend a huge amount of your time previously, let's say, taking a lot of data from the databases and reports and churning a presentation, for example, I would say you probably spend 50% less time now if you're able to leverage on some of the tools out there that is kind of driven by AI. And then you can use that 50% extra time that you gain to, for example, doing a bit more value add stuff. For example, speaking to your customers or doing other things that an AI currently can't do right now, right? So I would say one of the most promising areas that I'm looking at right now is seeing how humans can do what we're really good at doing, and then offloading a lot of the mundane, repetitive, or kind of like low value add stuff to the AI stuff. And I think that is probably going to be one of the biggest shifts in terms of how we work in the next 10 years, which is very interesting to observe.
Yeah, one of the things that's occurring for me is how comfortable and passionate, you are when you speak about AI. There's a lot of people who I work with and speak to who there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's fear. And it's kind of refreshing actually to speak to you, and you're just like glowing and excited. You're like a kid in a toy shop, right?
Yes.
Around AI. So what is it you feel that people should know about AI that might help to alleviate some of the fear?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest one, I'm about to give this this talk at a multinational manufacturing firm. And when I was preparing for it, I realized, hey, one of the advice that they were saying is that how do you motivate our people to adopt this technology? Because some people are fearful. So it's a really, really valid question. And then I was thinking. I was like, because I work with AI every day. I was like figuring, hey, what is, and then for me, I'm coming from a different angle because I'm building it. So it's less of a perspective of I'm fearful of it, I'm excited of it. But then I realized for the users of it, they may be fearful. And I realized actually, hey, increasingly when I'm building it, this is quite funny. I used to maybe take like 90% of my time programming and then 10% figuring out what features to build. But 90%, I'm coding and programming every day, debugging the models, then deploying them. And then it's just all code. And then my workflow, ironically now, and I would dare say a lot of my peers, in fact, is more of like 50% programming. And then like 40% is kind of just me talking to the AI algorithms on what I want to build. And it creates the code myself. So, I mean, it creates the code itself, and basically you'll create a code that I'll then integrate into my code base to deploy. What I'm driving at is that increasingly, not just the programmers or the researchers, the engineers themselves, but the users of this system are able to leverage on this AI using just purely natural language. What I mean by that is that we don't have to be fearful, because one of the best things right now is that we can get what we need to do just by talking to the AI. So you don't need even the technical knowledge of building these models. All you need is to be really decent at whatever language you are, whether you're good in English, or if you're in Vietnam, you're good in Vietnamese, whatever language it is, because the language models can handle it right now. And I would say, if you're good at talking, you're good at giving people instructions, which I like to assume most people are. It's actually really, really easy to kind of use an AI like that 24/7 kind of intern who's able to help you with whatever you're doing. And I would
this
even
is so refreshing. I have to say, it's really I've never had AI framed in this way.
So
interesting.
So it's like, can you imagine if all of us had like a 24/7 on standby intern who's able to help us any time of the day? You could wake up in the middle of the night and have this like epiphany. It's like, hey, I really want to build this app. And then instead of you like go and coding it, you just talk to the AI, and then it gives you that first draft of app, and then you could just do a quick soft launch and run a POC. And then if you're someone for finance, you're like, oh, I've been thinking of running this simulation. Instead of you coding it up or running the simulation, all the little Excel formulas, you tell the AI algorithm to come up with it, and then you run it. They come up with the formulas, you run it. So I would say it kind of alleviates the pain point. Instead of us doing the stuff that we don't like to do, we can now concentrate on the ideas and execution, rather than us concentrating on the nitty-gritty of how to execute that.
Right.
And I think that takes a lot of the fear out, because it just think of it as we have like this super, super happy, never sad intern who's always willing to help us in what we need to do any time of the day.
Well, I the way you're reframing it is totally refreshing for me. And the fear that I'm thinking of is, yes, there's the fear of how do I use it, but there's also the fear of, oh my gosh, this thing is going to take over my job, right? So there's this whole survival piece. And so what would you say to people who struggle at this level around creating, maybe having a different relationship with AI?
Yeah, so I would say, building on the point I mentioned about leveraging as like an intern, I would say, instead of thinking of the perspective of it taking away from your job, let me put it a bit more comically. You could leverage on it to even do it. How do I put it? You could leverage on it to appear more productive than you actually are. So what I mean by that, imagine if you're like this worker, right? This staff, whatever industry you're in, and then normally your manager knows that you can like produce this amount of output, right? Because he knows that you can handle, let's say, 10 clients if you're in client-facing industry, or you could handle like 2 projects a month. But suddenly with this AI, you could handle like 50 clients, because the AI could answer the boring questions when you're not around, for example. And then for projects, because like I said, you could talk, so you could produce way more updates and applications. So what I mean by that is that instead of thinking of it replacing your job, it's actually there to make you look better in front of your manager, because you can produce way more.
Yeah.
And I think coming from that angle is really, really amazing, because then we are at a point of humans versus humans, because rather than humans versus AI, it's about which human could better leverage on AI to be more productive, to create a bigger outputs, right? So then we are just talking less about human versus AI, but human versus human. Like me and you, if I could do a better job leveraging on AI, I'm definitely going to excel and produce more. And then my manager will be way more happier. You can produce more for the company. It's net benefit for everyone. So I would say, instead of thinking of human versus AI, is a better idea to think about human versus human, because that is definitely the case now. You have people who are definitely able to get a better job, a well-paying job, if you're able to leverage on AI. So if you have that
Very
angle,
interesting.
there's
Yeah.
less fear and more human competition, which is it's been there since a long time.
Right. And this isn't a battle. So if I'm choosing to have to resist AI,
Yeah.
it isn't a battle that I'm going to win, is it?
Yeah, so it is actually not a battle that you're winning against the AI. You're actually losing the battle with other humans, because
Right.
there are others out there who would leverage on it.
Right.
So
Because this is the future, isn't it?
yes. I mean, think of it as like, let's say like 20, 30 years ago, where if people like, you have your Microsoft Excel and Word and all of this, and that now is kind of like a thing. Like, if you don't know, it's a bit bizarre, but 20, 30 years ago, you could fight it and say that you could still do it by hand instead of Excel, for example. But then if someone who had a skill of really, really good Excel skills, that person will definitely stand out in,
Have
let's
the
say, a
upper hand,
finance
right.
role, or even any other roles. But let's
Yeah.
say, let's isolate it to finance role. So are you winning the battle against Excel by fighting against it? You're not. You're losing to someone else who learned that skill to be mastering Excel. So I like to think of it as just another software, rather than just this scary thing. It's just another software there to help us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I was just talking to someone prior to you, and we talked about the space in which he works. And one of the things that his organization does so beautifully is the service, the mood when you walk in, the sensations when you walk into the space. And that's something that AI cannot, right,
Yep.
address. But obviously the data and the analysis of the tests that they take is what AI can handle. But there's some things that human beings, as you're saying, can do really well.
Absolutely. I would say, in terms of the human touch, as when it comes to dealing with clients, it is still a very tricky part for AI to handle. For mundane stuff like asking about product questions and all of this, and AI is very capable of answering that using some of the RAG techniques and stuff like that. But when it comes to like interpersonal relationships, it is still a very human centric.
Do you think it'll
Yeah.
ever get there?
I wouldn't say it's not possible. In fact, I'm more optimistic as to how AI can become a bit more emotional and even mimic, as though you could not differentiate between human and AI in let's say 10 years time. The only reason why I'm saying that is that it's because the current state of language models, which is this whole subset of generative AI, where I'm sure you have used ChatGPT, where you talk to it and say, can you come up with a plan for me? I'm having a bad day, give me a joke, and it gives you a joke. Now, the funny thing
I've never done that. I've done holiday plans.
All right.
But
And
I
you-
will now try that.
You can ask it to give you a joke, and you can say, I'm really sad, give me some ideas. I'm going to somewhere with this, so hear me out. You can say, give me some ideas, my friend is really sad, what activities cheer him out, or maybe things that I should say, and then give some recommendations. Now, what I'm leading up with is that at the back of it, while it may not be that that capable to be able to comfort someone who's really sad right now, but I would say even a few years or 10 years time, at the back, there are rapid advances to basically go through kind of a bunch of chains of processes, of procedures to basically sound more human-like. So you can think of it as those examples I've given you. Instead of you have this one AI that says, hey, someone is asking that someone is a bit sad. So can you go through, I searched the internet to find activities to do that is fun because this person likes this. and some things that you see from the internet or your records that will make someone feel a bit better, and then synthesize them. So you're calling multiple AI at the back. AI, I call them agents at the back, and then synthesizing all that answer to come out with an answer that is a bit more human-like and very well thought out, right? It incorporates everything that you would know about you and is a bit more like friend-like. So what I'm trying to drive at is that given the rate of advances, there is a way to tweak it at the back of the AI models by using many models to basically come up with many models and synthesize that reply to sound more human-like. At this moment, they are very specialized, but if you could combine a few of them, or maybe even advance further where it's a singular model, but it's more likely to be many small models, we will likely reach a point where it could mimic a substantial amount of, I would say, that human touch that we see today.
Interesting. I'm just thinking of the words. So, this word artificial intelligence suggests that they can analyze, come up with their own answers, but actually they don't, right? They're accessing the web with all of the data that's already existing versus doing their own analysis.
It's a tricky part. I mean, at the back of this, we could go very technical or not, so I'd rather not go there. But I would basically illustrate simply. At the core of AI models, there isn't a strong reasoning module in it, if that's what you're alluding to. There isn't. However, there are ways, like I said, to combine a few models to basically force a reasoning path. So while the model underlying it cannot reason, you could ask it to create an output, for example, of a reasoning plan, and then use another model to take that reasoning plan to then come up with an answer. For example, like what I said, if you ask the model right now, can you give me something to cheer me out? And then you give something, some recommendations to cheer you, but you don't know how it reached that answer. Now, there's a hack to get an answer out of that, is that basically you get another AI model there to say, hey, before you give me an answer, I want you to give me the steps that you took to reason, to come out to that answer. And only then we'll synthesize that answer to give the user's reply back. So what I mean by that is that you could force an explicit reasoning in terms of a textual form to be expressed, and then you could see how that is being done.
Yeah.
But underlying, the models are not the best at doing very a specific type of reasoning right now, but you could force it out by saying, I want you to explicitly tell me how to do that. Yeah.
Wow. So where do you see this going in the next, 10 years? What are some of the surprise? This is what we can do now.
I would say a lot of my perspective, I would say there will be a lot of like customer facing interactions that we feel are a bit robotic right now, like for customer service, customer support, that I feel will evolve to a point where it almost feels like we will struggle to differentiate between a human and AI. And why I say now it's quite obvious, because when you're talking to an AI right now, they don't have filler words. They're very perfect. We've reached a point even where I say that it is actually increasingly hard to differentiate between an AI voice and a non-AI voice. It's still not 100% there, but I would say 90%. If you've seen the latest models out there, it is awfully human-like. One of the biggest flaw only right now is that they don't have filler words. You don't have your your
so that's the flaw.
You don't have the breaks. But there is rapid advances there that actually, I mean, I can't show you an example now, but you can, it is superhuman. Like if you ask me, I couldn't differentiate it when I first tried it out.
Physically, it looks like
it's in terms
form.
of the voice. In terms of the voice,
okay.
when you're calling someone or something like that, it is impossible. I almost thought like I was talking to a real person. And then I realized it was an algo. And what happened was that at the back, so this is an example of forced reasoning, is that instead of when you're having a lot of this text to voice, when you're talking on a phone or on a video, it actually creates the text first, like your ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
Like you come up with a plan that you ask for, a holiday plan. It converts that text into voice, right? So it's 2-step process. And someone thought about something. This is definitely not my idea. Just someone thought it was a good idea. Say, hey, it sounds very not natural at all because that whole plan comes out in perfect prose. I mean, of course, you have people coming out with perfect continuous prose, but he said in real life, when you're talking to someone, you're definitely going to have some filler word, right?
Right.
You're going to have some pauses. And then this genius, right, decided, why not we ask the AI model, when you're coming out with that, before you convert it to voice, put placeholders for filler words
Oh, wow.
and breaks. So
Yeah.
basically it creates this like tags in like text, like that little open inverted and close inverted commas to say, put a filler word here, put a filler word there, put a filler word here automatically. So you should try your ChatGPT, create a plan for you, put in filler words because I want to use this to convert it to audio.
It's really
And what happens is that when you convert it to audio, you end up with like, so this is my plan, and yeah, I'm not too sure about it. And you take a pause because there's a filler word that says pause there. And it was crazy because it sounds exactly like a real human. So I think this is going to be a huge one where it's fully developed from a voice perspective. It becomes really, really, really tough to differentiate.
Yeah. It's really fascinating because just listening to you talk, and my brain goes to the whole human piece, right? Because my lenses are through the lens of ontology, which is, what does it mean to be human, right? Yep. And so what's fascinating to me is you and your colleagues, right? You deconstruct how a human being communicates, how a human being thinks, and translate it into how AI, in this case, can replicate, right?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So how do you think, if we start to merge AI and being human, how do you think the growth of AI and its sophistication and similarity to being human, how do you think that's going to impact societies and communities and people? Behaviors, maybe, right?
That is a tough question. There is a positive, and I would say there's a negative aspects to this. So there's two sides of the coin. I think how we affect people is that I think initially it's always going to be some, I would say, apprehension because of the pace of how this is progressing. Building on that specific example I mentioned about how he's able to mimic a human, I just mentioned about how I really like the way you say it, that we're trying to learn how to be more human by looking at a human. So we are actually letting the AI to be more similar to human, which is actually at the very core of a lot of the progress right now. But beyond that, we've actually reached very performant, I would like to say state-of-the-art performance of actually mimicking a voice. So even after today, we can giggle about it, but I could probably copy your voice. So by adding all of this filler words and creating all of the content and then mimicking a voice, I could basically create a baby version of you to run maybe even this podcast on autopilot. Not to say that this podcast is not real, but maybe in a few years' time, it might not be real. So
interesting,
So
yeah.
I would say there is definitely some apprehension around there because some people are taking it a bit on the extreme side of this if you push it to that angle. But I would say on the other angle, I would say it resolves a lot of problem because right now in a lot of industries, there is a lot of shortage and a bit like the capacity to service customers, to service internally. And we can't just keep throwing the problems with more human hours because we need to concentrate on higher value stuff. So I would imagine that increasingly the positives is that all of us here would have more interesting jobs because we wouldn't be doing some of the mundane things that I mentioned because of this technology. So I would say it's a pros and cons here. On one side, the pros is that we definitely, in the next 5-10 years, we need to get used to changing jobs and changing jobs not for the sake of change, but more interesting jobs, which I think all of us want to have interesting jobs now. And a lot of people, you don't want to go to work doing boring stuff, right? So I think it's good. It's good. And then there's on the negative side is that there will definitely be people who will be pushing the technology too far to what it was originally intended for let's say negative purposes. So I think it's balancing and
As
dealing
with
with
everything
both.
though, right?
Yes. And when I say negative, it's because you know that in Singapore, we have a rising number of scams.
Right.
So you can imagine that this technology is being leveraged to increase, basically, I would like increase the amount of incidents of scam. So I would say it's a careful balance because us, we have interesting jobs. And as a human, we also need to be very wary that we have to deal with this in our day-to-day life and understand that it's not all real.
Yeah, it's really, you know, there's so many things going through my mind. Just number one, just your listening, right? So as you know, you're going to mimic my voice, right?
Yes.
So just the listening of tonality and pace and rhythm. So all of that. So it appeals to my coach lens, which is we're listening, right? And you're listening to certain distinctions that not everyone will be listening for, right? So that's really fascinating. The other thing is how human beings are going to be pushed to become more agile.
Yeah.
Because of what's coming up. So I can sit here and just resist it, or I can choose to push my capacity and just try something different, take risk.
Absolutely.
Expand how I see things, how I see myself. And so that's really fascinating to me.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It's going to be exciting, trust me.
Ritchie,
I feel like
trust
10 years
you.
ago.
What's that?
10 years ago, I was excited. I'm actually more excited right now.
And you'll be even more excited in 10 years'
In 10
time.
years' time, absolutely.
Oh
Absolutely.
my gosh. Well, thank you so much. I know this is just the beginning. This conversation, I think, is an evolution. And if we came back together in 10 years' time, we'll be having probably a bigger conversation around a similar topic.
Maybe we can try with like a AI version of me in 10 years' time.
And AI, because you're going to mimic me anyway. So an AI version of me.
That will be funny.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for being here. This is really interesting. Opened up how I see things. And just to the viewers to start to think about what is your relationship with AI? How have you leveraged on this technology that is surrounding us? And how are you pushing your capacity to become bigger, better, and different because of it? Thank you to both you and to all of you guys who are listening in. Bye.